Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of flickering oil lamps and whispered chants, where the air hums with the kind of stillness that makes you forget your inbox exists. Picture yourself in an ancient Indian monastery, nestled in a bamboo cot, the faint scent of sandalwood and damp earth wrapping around you like a soft shawl. You're not exactly living the dream here, no five-star amenities or fluffy pillows, and you'll probably be muttering, "Why didn't I bring earplugs for those early chants by sunrise?" But this is where the Buddha's monks live on 1 grain a day, and their story might just change how you see everything. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake on that bamboo cot, the kind that creaks with every move like it's auditioning for a horror movie soundtrack. The monastery around you is stirring. It's dawn in 5th century BCE India, somewhere near the Ganges, where mud brick cells huddle under a canopy of peepal trees. The air's cool, laced with the scent of wet straw and the faint tang of smoke from last night's fire. You're wrapped in a simple russet tunic, already itching from the straw poking through the cot, and you're pretty sure there's a cricket somewhere plotting to serenade you all day. Joke number 1, if this is monastic life, you're 1 creak away from signing up for a luxury spa instead. You sit up, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and that's when you hear it, a low, rhythmic chant drifting through the courtyard like a gentle wave. It's the monks, their voices soft but steady, like the hum of a river you can't quite see. You shuffle to the edge of your cell, straw sandals scuffing against the packed earth, and peek out. The courtyard's alive with saffron-robed figures, their heads shaved, moving with a kind of quiet purpose that makes your morning rush look like chaos. They're gathered around a small clay stupa, its dome glowing faintly in the dawn light, chanting sutras that echo off the mud walls. A mainstream historical fact, monasteries like this around the 5th century BCE were hubs of Buddhist practice, often near rivers like the Ganges, where monks lived with minimal possessions, focusing on meditation and the Buddhist teachings. This place isn't just a retreat, it's a testing ground for the mind. You step closer, the chants wrapping around you like a warm breeze, and notice the monks' faces, calm, almost otherworldly, despite their gaunt frames. They've been living on 1 grain a day, a practice you'll soon learn more about. But for now, it's hard to imagine how they're even standing. A young monk, maybe in his 20s, catches your eye. He's holding a small clay bowl, empty except for a single grain of rice, which he handles like it's a sacred relic. You're trying to wrap your head around it. Your breakfast usually involves at least a bowl of cereal, not a single speck. Joke number 2, if 1 grain's their meal, you'd probably eat the bowl out of desperation. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Buddhist monks sometimes marked their bowls with tiny etchings of fish, believing it symbolized abundance even in scarcity. You squint at the young monk's bowl, spotting faint fish shapes scratched into the clay, and it's oddly poetic, like they're fishing for peace in a sea of hunger. You're starting to feel the weight of this place, the way every action, every breath seems to carry a deeper meaning. The chants grow softer, almost a whisper now, as the monks prepare for their morning rituals. You notice an older monk, his face lined like a map, sitting cross-legged near the stupa, his eyes closed, completely still. He's not just meditating, he's embodying something you can't quite name yet. The sun's climbing higher, its light filtering through the peepal leaves, casting dappled patterns on the ground. You're trying to soak it all in, but a stray thought about your own life sneaks in. Maybe that time you skipped lunch to make a deadline wasn't so bad compared to this. Historians still argue whether the Buddha encouraged such extreme fasting for all monks, or if it was a later practice by ascetic followers. Some say it was a test of discipline, others think it was symbolic, not mandatory. Either way, these monks are...
Section 2. You're still lingering in the monastery courtyard, the echo of those dawn chants fading like a dream you can't quite hold on to. The sun's creeping higher, painting the mud brick cells in soft gold, and the air's warming up, carrying the scent of damp earth and a faint whiff of sesame oil from somewhere nearby. Your russet tunic's starting to stick to your skin, and those straw sandals are doing their best to remind you they weren't made for comfort. You're drawn to a small gathering near the stupa, where the monks are lining up for their morning ritual, one that's about to make your idea of portion control look like a feast. These guys are surviving on 1 grain a day, and you're here to see how they make it work without losing their minds. The monks are forming a quiet line, their saffron robes glowing like embers in the morning light. They're barefoot, moving with that same deliberate calm you noticed earlier, each holding a clay bowl etched with faint patterns, fish, lotuses, little reminders of something bigger. At the front of the line stands an older monk, his face as weathered as the stupa itself, holding a small woven basket. Inside, you glimpse a modest pile of rice grains, each one no bigger than a pebble. He's doling them out, 1 grain per monk, like he's handing out pieces of the universe itself. You're standing off to the side, trying not to gawk, but it's hard not to. Joke number 1, if this is breakfast, you're pretty sure you'd be raiding the monastery's pantry by noon. The young monk you noticed earlier, the one with the fish-etched bowl, steps forward, his hands steady as he accepts his single grain. He holds it between his fingers, examining it like it's a jewel, then places it carefully in his bowl with a small bow. The whole process is so reverent, it's almost hypnotic, like watching a dance where every step matters. You're starting to feel a little guilty for that second helping of dinner you had last week. A mainstream historical fact: in the 5th century BCE, Buddhist monks often practiced extreme asceticism, including minimal eating, as a way to detach from worldly desires and focus on spiritual growth. This 1 grain ritual isn't just about survival, it's a test of discipline, a way to train the mind to let go of craving, even for something as basic as food. You inch closer, the packed earth cool under your sandals, and notice the monks' expressions. They're not grimacing or grumbling, there's a quiet acceptance in their eyes, like they've made peace with hunger in a way you can't quite fathom. The older monk at the front murmurs a blessing with each grain, his voice low and steady, like a stream wearing down stone. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian monks sometimes believed that rice grains carried the energy of the earth, and eating just 1 was a way to connect with that life force without taking more than needed. You glance at the grain in the young monk's bowl, wondering if it's whispering some cosmic secret you'll never hear. It's oddly humbling, like the monastery itself is teaching you to look at the world differently. The line moves slowly, each monk taking their turn, and you're struck by the rhythm of it all, the soft shuffle of feet, the murmur of blessings, the faint rustle of people leaves overhead. You're trying to imagine living like this, but your stomach's already staging a quiet protest at the thought. Joke number 2, if 1 grain's their daily quota, you're pretty sure your stomach would file for a divorce by day 2. Still, there's something magnetic about their discipline, the way they've stripped life down to its barest essentials and found a kind of freedom in it. You notice a villager standing nearby, a woman in a faded indigo sari, watching the ritual with a mix of awe and skepticism. She's muttering under her breath something about how they'll starve before enlightenment, and you can't help but wonder if she's got a point. The last monk receives his grain, and the older monk sets the basket aside, its contents barely diminished. The monks disperse, some heading to meditate under the trees, others to their cells, their bowls cradled like sacred treasures. You're left standing there, the woman's words echoing in your mind. Historians still argue whether the Buddha himself endorsed such extreme practices, or if they evolved later among his followers. Some texts suggest he favored moderation, while others point to
You're stepping away from the monastery courtyard, the image of that single grain still lingering in your mind like a stubborn melody. The morning sun's climbing higher, casting long shadows from the peepal trees, and the air's warming up, thick with the scent of baked earth and blooming champa flowers. Your russet tunic's starting to feel like a second skin, and those straw sandals are collecting dust with every step as you head down a narrow path toward the nearby village. You're curious about what the locals think of the monks' one-grain ritual. Surely they've got opinions, and you're ready to hear the gossip that's been floating around like pollen on the breeze. The village comes into view, a cluster of mud brick huts with thatched roofs, some sagging like they've seen better days. Chickens cluck and scatter as you pass, and the air hums with the rhythmic thump of a woman pounding rice in a wooden mortar. You're weaving through the lanes, dodging a stray goat that's eyeing your sandals like they're a gourmet snack, when you spot a small gathering near a banyan tree. A group of villagers, farmers in faded indigo dhotis, women in russet saris, are clustered together, their voices low but buzzing with the kind of energy that only comes from a good story. You slow your pace, trying to look casual, but let's be real, you're here to eavesdrop. Joke number one, if gossip were a sport, these villagers would be winning gold medals by now. You find a spot near a cart piled with clay pots, close enough to hear, but not so close that you look like you're begging for an invite. The woman you saw at the monastery, the one in the indigo sari who wasn't buying the monk's fasting, is leading the conversation. Her arms still crossed, her tone sharp as a sickle. 1 grain a day, she scoffs, tossing her braid over her shoulder. They'll waste away before they find any peace. A farmer next to her, his hands stained with soil, chuckles and nods, adding, "My ox eats more than that, and it still complains." The group laughs, but there's an edge to it, like they're torn between disbelief and a grudging respect. You're starting to get why the monk's ritual is the talk of the village. It's so far from their daily grind, it might as well be magic. The chatter continues, and you catch snippets of their thoughts. A young woman with a clay water jar balanced on her hip wonders if the monks are secretly eating at night. "No one can live like that, can they?" she whispers, her eyes wide. An older man, leaning on a gnarled walking stick, shakes his head and mutters about how the Buddha must have some trick up his sleeve to keep them going. A mainstream historical fact. In the 5th century BCE, Buddhist monks' ascetic practices often baffled rural communities who relied on hearty meals to survive labor-intensive lives. Fasting was seen as both a spiritual feat and a potential risk, especially in a culture where food scarcity was a real threat. This village's skepticism isn't just gossip, it's a clash of worlds, one where survival meets spirituality. You're trying to blend in, but the cart's creaking under the weight of those pots, and you're pretty sure the goat's still plotting its sandal heist.
Joke number 2. If that goat makes a move, you're trading your sandals for a one-way ticket back to the monastery. Still, the villagers' words are pulling you in. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian villagers often believed that monks who fasted could gain supernatural powers, like seeing into the future or warding off evil spirits. Some even left small offerings at monastery gates, hoping for blessings. You glance around, half expecting to see a pile of rice somewhere, but all you spot is a kid kicking a rag ball, oblivious to the grown-ups' debate. The woman in the indigo sari, let's call her Priya based on a name you overhear, keeps going, her voice rising. "I'd like to see them try plowing a field on one grain," she says, and the farmer snorts. "They'd faint before the first row." The group's laughter fades as a new voice joins in. A young man, maybe a trader, judging by the bronze scale dangling from his belt. He's quieter, more thoughtful, saying he heard the monks find peace through their fasting, that it's not about the body but the mind. Priya rolls her eyes, but you can tell the idea's planted a seed.
Section 4. You're slipping away from the banyan tree's shade. The villagers' whispers about the monks' one-grain diet trailing behind you like a faint echo. The midday sun's relentless now, baking the dusty lanes of this 5th century BCE Indian village, and the air's thick with the scent of roasted cumin and drying millet. Your russet tunics clinging to your skin, and those straw sandals are starting to feel like they've got a personal grudge against your feet. You're headed back toward the monastery, but Priya, the woman in the indigo sari who scoffed at the monks' fasting, catches your eye. She's striding ahead, her basket of grain swinging, still muttering loud enough for you to hear. She's not just skeptical, she's ready to confront the monks herself, and you're curious enough to follow her lead. Priya's pace is brisk, her braid bouncing with every step, and you're half jogging to keep up without looking like you're stalking her. She's making a beeline for the monastery, her voice carrying over the cluck of chickens and the distant creak of an ox cart. "1 grain a day?" she calls out to no one in particular, her tone sharp as a freshly honed sickle. "I'll believe it when I see them work a field without fainting." You stifle a grin. She's got a point, but her fire's the kind that could either spark a fight or light a lantern. You're back at the monastery's edge now, where the mud brick cells and peepal trees come into view. And Priya's already spotted a group of monks near the stupa, their saffron robes glowing like embers in the sun. Joke number 1, if Priya's skepticism were a spice, it'd be the kind that burns your tongue off. The monks are tending to small tasks. Some sweep the courtyard with palm brooms. Others sit cross-legged, meditating under the trees. The young monk with the fish-etched bowl is among them, his face as calm as a still pond, polishing a clay lamp with a scrap of cloth. Priya doesn't hesitate. She marches right up, her basket slamming onto the ground with a thud that makes a few monks glance over. "How do you do it?" she demands, hands on her hips, her indigo sari catching the light. "1 grain a day and you're still standing? I'd be dead by sunset." The young monk pauses, his hands still, and looks at her with a quiet curiosity, like she's a puzzle he's trying to solve. You hang back near a neem tree, close enough to hear, but far enough to avoid Priya's glare. She's not in the mood for an audience. The other monks don't react much, their faces serene. But Priya's words ripple through the courtyard like a stone dropped in water. A mainstream historical fact, in the 5th century BCE, lay people often interacted with Buddhist monks, sometimes challenging their practices, as monasteries relied on village support for alms. Tensions like Priya's weren't uncommon, especially over ascetic habits that seemed impossible to ordinary folks. The young monk finally speaks, his voice soft but steady, like a breeze through the peepal leaves. "It's not the grain that sustains us," he says, "it's the mind." Priya snorts, crossing her arms tighter, and you can almost hear her thinking, "Mind? My mind's telling me to eat lunch." You're with her on that one. Your stomach's starting to grumble just watching this. Priya's not backing down. "Mind or not, you'd keel over plowing my fields," she says, pointing a finger at the monk. "I've got 3 kids to feed, and I can't afford to faint over some fancy idea." The monk doesn't flinch, just sets the clay lamp down and picks up his bowl, showing her the single brain inside. "This is enough," he says, "because we let go of wanting more." You're watching Priya's face, waiting for her to laugh or storm off, but there's a flicker of something else. Curiosity, maybe, or annoyance that he's not taking the bait. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian villagers sometimes believed that monks who fasted could curse those who mocked them, a superstition that led some to tread carefully around ascetics. You wonder if Priya's heard those tales. Her tone's bold, but her eyes dart around, like she's half expecting a cosmic zap. The young monk's calm is unshakable, and it's starting to get under Priya's skin. "Prove it," she challenges, her voice of defiance and genuine intrigue. "Fast with me tomorrow. Let's see who lasts." The monk bows slightly, not a yes or a no.
Section 5. You're stepping away from the monastery courtyard, Priya's bold challenge to the young monk still ringing in your ears like a distant drumbeat. The midday heat is a heavy blanket now, pressing down on the dusty paths as you follow a group of monks toward a quieter corner of the grounds. Your russet tunics practically glued to your skin, and those straw sandals are kicking up little clouds of dust with every step. The air's thick with the scent of sun-baked earth and a faint trace of neem, and you're starting to wonder if you'll ever get used to this 5th century BCE Indian sun. The monks ahead, their saffron robes glowing like embers, are heading to a meditation spot, an open field they call the fasting grounds, where their one-grain discipline is put to the test. You're tagging along, curious to see how they stay so calm when their bodies must be screaming for more than a single speck of rice. The fasting grounds are a wide, flat expanse just beyond the monastery's mud brick cells, bordered by a grove of sal trees that rustle softly in the breeze. The ground's hard-packed, scattered with patches of dry grass, and the monks are already settling in, spreading out woven mats in a loose circle. You find a spot at the edge, plopping down cross-legged on the earth, though your knees are already grumbling about the lack of a cushion. The monks' bodies are frail, ribs faintly visible through their robes, arms thin as reeds. But their faces are serene, eyes half closed, as if they've found a secret doorway to peace that hunger can't touch. You're trying to wrap your head around it, but your own stomach's starting to growl, and you're pretty sure it's staging a protest. Joke number 1, if this is what fasting looks like, your stomach's ready to lead a full-on rebellion by dinner. The young monk with the fish-etched bowl is here, sitting a few mats away. His posture straight but relaxed, like a bamboo stalk that bends without breaking. He's breathing slowly, each inhale and exhale a quiet rhythm that seems to sync with the rustling sal leaves. The other monks follow suit, their collective stillness creating a kind of hum in the air, like the monastery itself is meditating with them. You try to mimic their breathing, but a fly keeps buzzing near your ear, and you're half tempted to swat it into next week. A mainstream historical fact. In the 5th century BCE, Buddhist monks often used meditation as a tool to transcend physical needs, including hunger. Fasting grounds like this were common in early monasteries, where monks would sit for hours, training their minds to detach from bodily cravings. This field isn't just a place to sit,
It's a battlefield where the mind takes on the body. You shift on the ground, the dry grass prickling through your tunic, and notice the monks' hands resting lightly on their knees, some holding their clay bowls with that single grain still inside, untouched. They're not eating yet. Apparently, the ritual involves meditating through the hunger first, a test of endurance you're not sure you'd pass. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian monks sometimes believed that fasting under the midday sun could purify their karma, the heat acting like a spiritual fire to burn away impurities. You glance up at the sun, its glare making you squint and wonder if the monks are feeling purified or just plain roasted. It's a humbling sight though, their frail bodies somehow radiating a strength that's hard to define, like they've tapped into a well of calm you didn't know existed. The silence stretches on, broken only by the occasional chirp of a bird, or the faint buzz of that fly, which is definitely on a mission to ruin your zen. You're trying to focus, but your mind keeps wandering to Priya's challenge. Will she really fast with them tomorrow, or was that all talk? The young monk opens his eyes briefly, catching your gaze, and there's a flicker of understanding in his expression, like he knows exactly what you're thinking. Hunger is loud, he whispers, his voice barely audible, but the mind can be louder. You nod, pretending you get it, but honestly, your mind's mostly shouting about lunch right now. Joke number 2, if your mind's supposed to be louder than hunger, it's currently losing to a very vocal stomach. The heat's starting to get to you, a bead of sweat trickling down your back, but the monks don't even flinch. Their calm is almost unnerving, like they've figured out how to turn off the part of themselves that complains about discomfort. You're starting to see why Priya was so skeptical. This kind of discipline feels otherworldly, like something you'd read about in a scroll, not witness in real life.
Section 6. You're slipping away from the moonlit clearing, the Buddha's mindfulness lesson still humming in your chest like a soft echo. The village sleeps under a blanket of stars, save for the occasional dog barking or a distant cowbell's clink. Your sandals scrape along the dirt path, and the night air carries a faint whiff of damp earth and ballooning neem. You're headed to a quieter corner of the village, where the huts thin out and the shadows grow long. Word spread that the Buddha's visiting a woman no one talks to, an outcast, shunned for reasons you're not quite sure of yet. You're curious, maybe a little nervous, but after that starlit sangha, you're ready for another story that might shift the ground beneath you. You reach a lone hut, its mud walls crumbling, its thatch roof more holes than cover. A faint glow spills from a cracked clay lamp inside, and you hear a soft voice humming, then stopping abruptly. You pause by a gnarled mango tree, trying not to look like a nosy neighbor. The woman steps out. Her name's Sita. You overhear from a passing villager who spits the word like it's sour. She's thin, her sari patched and faded, her hair tied back with a strip of cloth. Her eyes are wary, scanning the dark, but there's a defiance in her stance, like she's used to standing alone. Joke number 1. Sita's hut makes your last Airbnb look like a palace, but at least she's got no roommates stealing her leftovers. The Buddha appears, his ochre robe catching the lamplight as he approaches. The village dogs don't even bark. Seriously, does this guy have a secret deal with animals? He greets Sita with a nod, no judgment, no hesitation, like she's the village head instead of its outcast. You inch closer, crouching behind a wicker basket someone left out. A mainstream historical fact.
The Buddha's teachings in the 5th century BCE were revolutionary for embracing outcasts, including women and those shunned by caste or circumstance, offering them a place in the Sangha or as lay followers. Sita's not just a footnote. She's part of a quiet rebellion against a rigid world. Sita's voice is sharp at first. "Why are you here? They say I'm cursed." You catch whispers from your earlier chats with villagers, rumors she lost her family, broke some unspoken rule, maybe both. The Buddha sits on the ground, right there in the dirt, and gestures for her to join him. She hesitates, then kneels, clutching a small wooden amulet like it's her last anchor. He speaks of compassion, metta, the practice of loving kindness for all beings, starting with yourself. Your pain is not your fault, he says. Your heart is not broken beyond repair. You feel a lump in your throat, thinking of times you felt like you didn't belong, like that group chat you were mysteriously dropped from. The Buddha tells a story, a single verse, about a lotus rising clean from muddy water. You are the lotus, he says. Sita's eyes widen, and you're pretty sure yours do too. You glance at the hut's sagging roof, imagining it as that muddy pond, and suddenly it's not just a crumbling shack, it's a stage for something bigger. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian women sometimes carved lotus shapes into wooden amulets, believing they brought protection. Sita's amulet, glinting in the lamplight, might be one of those, a tiny rebellion against her outcast status. Joke number 2. If Sita's amulet wards off bad vibes, you're tempted to borrow it for your next family reunion. Sita's voice softens, asking how she can live with the village's scorn. The Buddha talks about forgiveness, not just for others, but for herself. Send kindness to those who hurt you, he says, and to your own wounds. You're trying to picture sending.
Section 7. You're drifting away from Sita's hut, her quiet humming fading into the night like a half-forgotten lullaby. The village is waking now, dawn painting the sky in streaks of mango and rose. The air's thick with the scent of fresh cow dung and blooming champa flowers, and your sandals are starting to feel like they're plotting a mutiny against your feet. Today's different. There's a buzz in the lanes, a pulse of excitement. The village is hosting a fair, a chaotic sprawl of stalls and music, and word's out that the Buddha's stopping by to talk about karma. You're not sure if it's a cosmic TED Talk or just another day in 5th century BCE India, but you're weaving through the crowd to find out. The fair's in full swing at the village square, a dusty clearing ringed by banyan trees. Stalls overflow with clay lamps, heaps of lentils, and garlands of marigolds that smell like summer and promises. You dodge a kid waving a sugarcane stick like it's a sword, and nearly trip over a basket of betel nuts. Musicians thump on goatskin drums, and a flute player's tune weaves through the chatter like a bright thread. You're tempted to grab a handful of roasted chickpeas from a vendor, but your ancient India budget's basically good vibes only. Joke number 1, this fair's got everything, spices, music, and zero chance of you affording that shiny brass bangle. You spot a crowd gathering near a wooden platform where the Buddha stands, his ochre robe catching the morning light like it's been ironed by angels.
He's calm, as usual, while the fair swirls around him like a storm. He's chosen to ignore. You squeeze in next to a teenage girl juggling a clay pot and a toddler, her eyes glued to the Buddha. A mainstream historical fact: village fairs in ancient India around the 5th century BCE weren't just markets. They were social hubs where ideas, including Buddhist teachings, spread like wildfire among traders, farmers, and wanderers. This fair's a hotspot, and the Buddha's about to drop some truth bombs on karma. He starts, voice steady as a river. Karma is action, and action shapes your path, he says, holding up a marigold garland. Plant a seed of kindness, you harvest peace. Plant greed, you harvest thorns. You glance at the girl beside you, who's whispering to her toddler about good seeds. You're thinking of your own actions, like that time you accidentally took credit for a group project. Karma's sounding less like a cosmic report card and more like a mirror you can't dodge. The crowd's leaning in. Even the chickpea vendors paused his shouting to listen. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indians sometimes offered marigolds at fairs not just for decoration, but to honor traveling teachers, believing the flowers carried blessings. You notice a pile of marigolds at the platform's edge, probably tossed by fans of the Buddha's earlier talks. It's sweet, but you're half expecting someone to start a merch stall with "Karma's real" engraved on clay tablets. Joke number 2. If marigolds are blessings, you're tempted to grab a handful, but you'd probably just sneeze your way to nirvana. The teenage girl, let's call her Leela based on her muttering, pipes up, her pot wobbling. But what if I'm stuck? My family's poor, my work's endless. Her toddler tugs at her sorry, and you feel her exhaustion, like she's carrying the whole fair on her back. The Buddha looks at her, eyes soft but piercing. Your actions now shape what comes, he says. Give kindness even in hardship, and the path opens. He points to a cart nearby, its wheels stuck in mud. Push it free, and it moves. Karma works the same. Leela nods, like she's seeing a way out of her rut. And you're wondering if I should start small, like not rolling your eyes at bad drivers. Historians still argue whether the Buddha's karma teachings built on Vedic ideas of cosmic balance or flipped them into
Section 8. You're weaving away from the fair's vibrant chaos, Lila's marigold offering, and the Buddha's karma talk still glowing in your mind like embers. The village paths are quieter now, the midday sun hammering down, turning the air into a stew of dust and dried grass. Your tunic's sticking to you like a clingy X, and your sandals are collecting enough dirt to start a garden. You're headed toward the fields beyond the village, where millet and barley sway under a cloudless sky. There's a story brewing. A farmer's having a bad day, and the Buddha's about to turn a broken cart into a masterclass on patience. You're not sure if it's cosmic timing or just another dusty detour, but you're tagging along. You reach the edge of a field where a wooden cart's tipped sideways, one wheel cracked like it tried to fist bump a boulder and lost. Millet stalks are trampled nearby, and a skinny ox stands chewing cud, looking unimpressed by the drama. The farmer, a wiry man named Drona, is kneeling by the cart, his turban askew, muttering curses that'd make a sailor blush. His hands are calloused, his dhoti stained with sweat and soil, and he's jabbing a stick at the broken wheel like it personally insulted his ancestors. You settle on a nearby rock, trying not to laugh at the scene. Joke number 1, Drona's cart's so busted, it's auditioning for the ancient Indian version of Pimp My Ride. A small crowd's gathering, kids giggling, a neighbor with a water gourd shaking his head. Then the Buddha arrives, his ochre robe catching the sun like a quiet flame. He doesn't say anything at first, just watches Drona wrestle with the wheel, which is now wobbling like a drunk toddler. You're impressed by the Buddha's chill. Most people would have offered unsolicited advice by now, like your uncle at every family barbecue. A mainstream historical fact: agriculture was the backbone of ancient Indian villages in the 5th century BCE, with farmers like Drona relying on wooden carts and oxen to haul crops to markets or storehouses. One broken wheel could mean a missed sale or a hungry month, so Drona's stress is no joke. The Buddha finally speaks, his voice cutting through the field's haze. Anger at the wheel changes nothing, he says, crouching beside Drona. Drona pauses, stick mid-jab, looking like he's torn between arguing and crying. You relate. Last time your Wi-Fi crashed, you were one reboot away from yeeting your router out the window. The Buddha picks up a splintered piece of the wheel, holding it like it's a sacred relic. This broke because it was time, he says. Your task is to act with a steady heart. You're starting to see where this is going. Patience isn't just waiting. It's not losing your cool when life's throwing curveballs. Drona grumbles. Easy for you to say, my crop's rotting while I fix this mess. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, because, yeah, enlightenment's great, but bills don't pay themselves. The Buddha smiles, barely, and points to the ox, still chewing like it's on a spa day. You stifle a snort, imagining Drona taking life advice from his ox, but the farmer's face softens, like he's actually considering it. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian farmers sometimes tied small bells to their oxen, believing the jingle warded off evil spirits. You notice a tiny bronze bell on Drona's ox, glinting in the sun, and wonder if it's been ringing through this whole meltdown. Joke number 2. If that bell's protecting anything, it's definitely not Drona's blood pressure. The Buddha shifts to a teaching on patience as part of the Noble Eightfold Path: right effort, right mindfulness. Meet each moment without pushing it away, he says. The wheel broke, now you mend it. Drona drops his stick, wiping his brow, and starts prying the broken wheel off with a calmer grip. You're thinking of your own impatient moments, like Section 9. You're leaving Drona's field behind. The farmer's newfound patience and that jingly ox bell still lingering in your thoughts like a catchy tune. The village feels distant now, its dusty lanes giving way to a winding path toward the Ganges River. The late afternoon air is heavy, scented with wet earth and wild mint, and your sandals sink slightly into the softening ground. The sun's a low ember, gilding the horizon, and you're pretty sure that goat's finally given up its sandal-stealing dreams, at least for today. You're headed to the riverbank, where the Buddha's said to be teaching, and the word is he's diving into something big: interconnectedness. You're not expecting a PowerPoint, but you're ready for a moment that might rewire how you see the world. The Ganges comes into view, a wide, shimmering ribbon cutting through the landscape, its surface catching the sunset like a mirror. Reeds sway along the bank, and a lone egret stalks the shallows, looking like it's got life all figured out. You find a spot on a grassy knoll, settling cross-legged, though your back's already whispering complaints about all this sitting. A handful of villagers are here, fishers with woven nets, a woman with a clay water jar, a kid skipping pebbles across the water. The Buddha's seated on a flat stone, his ochre robe blending with the river's glow, his face calm as if he's part of the current. Joke number 1, this riverbank's so peaceful, it's like nature's attempt at a spa day, but with 0 fluffy towels. The Buddha starts, his voice blending with the river's soft gurgle. All things are woven together, he says, scooping a handful of water and letting it slip through his fingers. The river, the tree, your breath, none stand alone. You watch the droplets fall, catching the light, and it hits you. He's talking about how everything's linked, like a cosmic group chat you didn't know you were in. A mainstream historical fact, the Ganges was central to ancient Indian life in the 5th century BCE, not just for water, but as a spiritual lifeline, shaping Buddhist teachings and rituals. This river's no backdrop, it's a teacher, and the Buddha's leaning into its flow. He points to a banyan tree nearby, its roots sprawling like a living net. The tree drinks from the river feeds the fish feed the fisher. Your actions ripple through it all. You glance at the fisher, mending a net with a bamboo needle, his face creased with focus. He's nodding, like he's seeing his daily haul as part of something bigger. You're thinking of your own ripples, maybe that time you snapped at a cashier or helped a friend move. The kid with the pebbles tosses another, and the ripples spread, overlapping, a perfect little demo of the Buddha's point. You're tempted to clap, but that probably scare the egret. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indians sometimes floated tiny clay lamps on the Ganges during festivals, believing the light carried prayers. You spot a stray lamp bobbing near the reeds, its wick barely flickering, and it's oddly mesmerizing, like a text message to the universe. Joke number 2, if you floated a lamp for every bad decision you've made, the Ganges would look like a candlelit rave. The woman with the water jar shifts closer, her jar balanced on her hip. She asks, "But what if my life's small? I just fetch water, cook, repeat." Her voice is tired, like she's been carrying more than clay. The Buddha looks at her, eyes steady. "No act is small," he says. "Your water nourishes your family. Their work feeds the village holds the world." He gestures to the river, endless and flowing. You are the river, not just the jar. Her face softens, like she's seeing her daily grind as a thread in a larger tapestry. You're feeling it too.
Section 10. You're walking away from the Ganges, its shimmering ripples and the Buddha's talk on interconnectedness still flowing through your mind like a gentle current. The village is a distant hum now, and you're on a wider, stone-lined path leading to a grander destination, a royal pavilion just outside the settlement, where tamarind trees cast long shadows in the early evening light.
The air smells of polished wood and blooming lotuses, with a faint tang of incense drifting from somewhere posh. Your sandals are holding up, barely, and you're hoping that pesky goats found a new hobby. Tonight, the Buddha's meeting a king, and the buzz is he's wrestling with a big question: how to find peace when you're running a kingdom. You're tagging along, ready for a lesson that might hit differently in a place with actual furniture. The pavilion's a sight. Teak pillars carved with vines, a silk canopy fluttering in the breeze, and clay lamps casting a warm glow. Guards in linen tunics stand at the entrance, their bronze-tipped spears glinting, but they wave you through, probably because you look harmlessly dusty. Inside, the king, let's call him Ajit based on the servants' whispers, sits on a cushioned platform, his silk robe heavy with gold thread, a jade amulet dangling at his chest. He's middle-aged, with a beard trimmed to perfection, but his eyes are restless, like he's trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. You settle on a woven mat near a sandalwood screen, feeling wildly underdressed. Joke number 1, Ajit's pavilion's so fancy, you're pretty sure your entire apartment could fit in his spice cabinet. The Buddha arrives, his ochre robe a stark contrast to the pavilion's opulence, moving with that calm stride that makes everyone else seem like they're late for something. Ajit stands, bowing slightly, which feels like a big deal for a guy who probably has people bowing to him 24/7. You're close enough to hear their conversation, but you're trying to blend in, like a wallflower of a royal TED Talk. A mainstream historical fact: in the 5th century BCE, the Buddha often advised rulers like those of Magadha or Kosala, shaping their policies with teachings on ethics and nonviolence, a radical shift in a world of constant wars and power grabs. Ajit's not just a VIP, he's a test case for the Buddha's ideas in the real world. Ajit wastes no time. "I rule a kingdom, but my mind's a battlefield," he says, gesturing to a bronze tray of untouched fruit like it's proof of his stress. "Enemies plot, taxes fail, my people quarrel, where's peace?" You relate on a smaller scale, like when your inbox, laundry, and existential dread all hit at once. The Buddha sits, folding his legs, and starts talking about the middle path, the balance between extremes. Chase pleasure, you suffer. Deny yourself, you suffer. Walk the middle, you find peace. He points to a lotus in a clay bowl, half open. It doesn't force its bloom, nor hide in the mud. You're nodding, thinking of your own pendulum swings, binge-watching shows, or swearing off fun for productivity. Ajit leans forward, skeptical. "But I'm a king. Balance sounds nice, but I've got wars to avoid." The Buddha's unfazed, describing the middle path as right view, right action, right livelihood. Practical steps, not just monk stuff. Rule with justice, not greed, he says. Protect, don't conquer. You see Ajit's jaw tighten, like he's picturing his council of advisors throwing a fit. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian kings sometimes kept lotus-shaped bronze seals to stamp royal decrees, a nod to purity and authority. You spot one on Ajit's tray, glinting beside the fruit.
Section 11. You're slipping away from the king's pavilion. Ajit's lotus-staring moment, and the Buddha's middle path lesson still circling your thoughts like a stubborn moth. The village is a faint glow behind you, and you're on a narrow path winding through fields, the night giving way to a gray, heavy dawn. The air's thick with the promise of rain, smelling of wet straw and distant wood smoke. Your sandals are barely hanging on, caked with dirt, and you're starting to think that goat's the least of your problems. Clouds are rolling in, low and grumpy, and you're headed to a spot where the Buddha said to be teaching despite the weather. The talks about resilience, and with raindrops already speckling your tunic, you're about to get a front row seat to why it matters. The path turns muddy, each step a squelching battle that threatens to yank your sandals clean off. You're not alone. Other villagers are trudging along, their dhotis and saris splattered, carrying baskets or clay pots under makeshift palm leaf umbrellas. You spot a young man ahead, maybe in his 20s, struggling with a bamboo pole slung across his shoulders, water jars dangling from each end. His name's Ravi, you overhear from a chatty auntie nearby, and he's got a reputation for bad luck. Flooded fields, sick parents, you name it. He's slipping in the mud, muttering under his breath, and you're tempted to offer help, but you're barely staying upright yourself. Joke number 1. This path's so muddy, it's like the universe decided to prank you with a 5th century BCE slip and slide. The rain's picking up, a steady drizzle that turns the path into a soupy mess. You reach a small clearing sheltered by a cluster of neem trees, their leaves dripping like overworked faucets. The Buddha's there, seated on a woven mat under a makeshift canopy of banana leaves, his ochre robe somehow untouched by the muck. A handful of soggy villagers huddle around, including Ravi, who set his jars down and looks like he's one puddle away from quitting life. You find a spot on a soggy log, your tunic now a wet rag. A mainstream historical fact: in ancient India, around the 5th century BCE, monsoon rains were both a blessing and a curse. Vital for crops, but brutal for travel and daily life. Ravi's struggle, and yours, is just another day in monsoon season. The Buddha starts, his voice cutting through the rain's patter like a steady drum. Resilience is standing firm when the storm comes, he says, gesturing to the muddy path. Life bends you, but you choose to rise. He picks up a small reed from the ground, bending it without breaking. Be the reed, not the stone. You glanced at Ravi, who's wiping rain from his face, his eyes locked on the Buddha. You're feeling it too. Life's been throwing mud at you, like that time your car broke down and your phone died in the same hour. The rain's drumming harder now, but the Buddha's calm is contagious, like he's daring the clouds to try harder. Ravi speaks up, his voice rough. How do I keep going? Everything falls apart. My jars leak. My family's hungry. The auntie nearby clucks sympathetically, and you're rooting for him because, yeah, you've had days where the universe seems to have a personal grudge. The Buddha leans forward, rain dripping from the banana leaves above. Each step through the mud is a choice, he says. See the struggle, but don't let it own you. He talks about right effort and right mindfulness, parts of the Eightfold Path, urging Ravi to meet hardship with a clear heart. You're thinking of your own battles, maybe not leaky jars, but deadlines or drama that feel just as heavy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian villagers sometimes carved tiny fish into bamboo poles, believing they brought luck during monsoons. You notice faint fish shapes on Ravi's pole, barely visible through the mud, and it's oddly charming,
like he's got a tiny aquarium cheering him on. Joke number 2. If those fish bring luck, they're clearly on vacation because Ravi's jars are still leaking like a bad plumbing job. Still, Ravi's listening, his shoulders squaring, like the Buddha's words are a rope he's starting to grip. Historians still argue.
Section 12. You're slogging back from the muddy riverbank, Ravi's resilient trudging, and the Buddha's reed-bending wisdom still clinging to your thoughts like damp earth. The village is stirring under a post-rain sky, the air fresh with petrichor and the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine. Your sandals are a lost cause, caked in mud, and you're half convinced that goats out there somewhere laughing at your soggy state. It's early morning now, the sun a soft glow through thinning clouds, and you're headed to a quiet corner of the village where a small monastery sits. The Buddha's there, and so's a monk who's got everyone whispering, not for his words, but for his silence. You're curious how a guy who says nothing can teach non-attachment, so you're tagging along to see. The monastery's a simple setup, a cluster of mud brick cells around a courtyard, shaded by a single peepal tree with leaves still dripping from the rain. A clay stupa, no taller than you, hums with quiet reverence, and a few monks sweep the ground with palm brooms, their saffron robes swishing softly. You find a spot on a stone bench, your tunic still damp but marginally less miserable. The monk in question, let's call him Sumedha, based on a villager's hushed gossip, sits cross-legged near the stupa, eyes half closed, hands resting like they've never known a fidget. He's young, maybe 30, with a face so still, it's like he's carved from teak. Joke number 1. Sumedha's so quiet, he makes your last Zoom meeting look like a rock concert. The Buddha's nearby, seated on a woven mat, his ochre robe catching the morning light like a warm ember. A small crowd's gathered, villagers with wicker baskets, a trader with a bronze scale dangling from his belt, a kid clutching a mango like it's a trophy. They're all watching Sumedha, who hasn't spoken in months apparently, but still draws a crowd. A mainstream historical fact. In the 5th century BCE, Buddhist monks like Sumedha were part of the early Sangha, living simply and often practicing silence to cultivate detachment and mindfulness, a stark contrast to the lavish Vedic rituals of the time. Sumedha's not just chilling, he's a walking billboard for non-attachment. The Buddha starts, his voice low and steady, like the drip of rain from the peepal leaves. Non-attachment is letting go without losing, he says, nodding towards Sumedha. He holds nothing, yet lacks nothing. You watch Sumedha, who's so still you're not sure he's breathing. The Buddha explains that clinging to possessions, grudges, even dreams ties you to suffering. Release the rope, he says, and you're free to walk. You're thinking of your own ropes, that overstuffed closet, or the way you replay that one argument in your head. The trader shifts, his scale clinking, like he's wondering if he's too attached to his profits. A villager, a woman with a patched sari, speaks up. But how do I let go? My family needs me. My work's endless. Her voice cracks, and you feel her weight, like she's carrying the whole village in her basket. The Buddha gestures to Sumedha, who opens his eyes and, without a word, picks up a small clay bowl from the ground. He holds it lightly, then sets it down, his movement so deliberate it's like a silent poem. He acts but doesn't cling, the Buddha says. Care for your family, but don't let fear or want bind you. You're starting to get it. Non-attachment isn't ghosting your responsibilities. It's not letting them own you. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Buddhist monks sometimes carried bowls with tiny etchings of vines or lotuses, a reminder of impermanence. You notice Sumedda's bowl has faint vine patterns, barely visible in the morning light, and it's oddly grounding, like a post-it note from the universe saying, "Chill, nothing lasts." Joke number 2. If Sumedda's bowl could talk, it'd probably just whisper, "Let go, dude, I'm just a bowl." The woman's watching Sumedda, her...
Section 13. You're slipping away from the monastery's quiet courtyard, Sumedda's silent bowl-handing moment, and a Buddha's non-attachment lesson still settling in your mind like dust after a breeze. The village is waking under a mid-morning sun, the air warm with the scent of baked earth and faint wood smoke from cooking fires. Your sandals, still muddy from yesterday's rain, crunch along a path lined with neem trees, and you're relieved that goat seems to have clocked out of its sandal-stealing shift. You're headed to a modest hut near the village center, where an elder's grappling with his fear of death, and the Buddha's said to be offering comfort. You're not sure if it's a heavy talk or a gentle one, but you're weaving through the lanes to find out. The hut's unassuming, its mud walls smoothed by years, its thatch roof patched with fresh palm leaves. A banyan tree looms nearby, its roots sprawling like an old friend's embrace. You spot the elder, let's call him Gopal, based on a kid's chatter, sitting on a woven mat outside, his back curved like a question mark, his hands clutching a gnarled walking stick. His face is a map of wrinkles, and his eyes dart nervously, like he's counting every breath. A clay water jug sits beside him, condensation beading on its curve. You settle on a nearby stone, trying not to look like you're crashing a private moment. Joke number 1, Gopal's hut's so cozy, it's like the 5th century BCE version of a tiny home, but with zero Wi-Fi. The Buddha arrives, his ochre robe catching the sunlight like a soft flame, moving with that calm that makes the world feel less frantic. Gopal looks up, his stick trembling, and mutters a greeting, his voice thin as papyrus. A few villagers linger nearby, a woman grinding millet, a boy tossing a reed ball, drawn by the Buddha's presence but keeping their distance. A mainstream historical fact: in ancient Indian villages of the 5th century BCE, elders like Gopal were revered for their wisdom, but often faced isolation as death loomed, with Buddhist teachings offering new perspectives on mortality in a culture steeped in Vedic rituals. Gopal's fear isn't just personal, it's a window into a shifting world. The Buddha sits beside Gopal, right on the dirt, no fuss, like he's visiting an old friend. "What troubles you?" he asks, his voice steady as the banyan's roots. Gopal's words spill out. "I'm old, my body fails, death's coming. What's left of me?" His stick taps the ground, restless, and you feel a pang, thinking of your own quiet worries. Maybe not death, but the way time slips through your fingers. The Buddha picks up a fallen banyan leaf, its edges curled. "This leaf falls, yet the tree lives," he says. "You are not just this body. Your actions, your kindness, ripple beyond. You're leaning in because, yeah, that's heavy, but also oddly comforting." Gopal's eyes narrow, skeptical. "But I'm scared, nothingness, or worse." The woman grinding millet pauses, her pestle still, like she's waiting for the answer too. The Buddha smiles, barely, and talks about impermanence, how all things, bodies, fears, even mountains, pass. Fear binds you, he says. See death as a breath, not a wall. He speaks of mindfulness, of resting in the present, not chasing what's next. You're thinking of your own late-night spirals, doom scrolling, or stressing about tomorrow's to-do list. Joke number 2, if Gopal's fear's a wall, yours is more like a pop-up ad you can't close. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian elders sometimes kept small clay amulets shaped like wheels, symbolizing life's cycle, tucked in their huts for comfort. You notice a wheel-shaped charm tied to Gopal's stick, glinting faintly, and it's like a tiny anchor for his shaky heart. It's sweet, but you're not sure it's doing the trick. Gopal's still gripping that stick like it's his last lifeline. The Buddha shifts.
Section 14. You're wandering away from Gopal's hut. The elders' softened fear, and the Buddha's banyan leaf wisdom still rustling in your thoughts like a gentle wind. The village is alive now, midday sun blazing, the air thick with the scent of roasted cumin and drying laundry. Your sandals, still gritty from mud, slap against the packed earth, and you're keeping an eye out for that goat who's probably promoted itself to village crime lord by now. You're headed to a shady grove just beyond the village, where monks collect alms, and, rumor has it, a thief's about to cross paths with the Buddha. You're not expecting a heist movie, but a lesson that flips a thief's heart sounds like a story worth catching. The grove is a pocket of calm, tamarind trees casting dappled shade, their leaves whispering in a faint breeze. A dirt path winds through, lined with wild marigolds, and you spot a group of monks in saffron robes, their clay alms bowls glinting in the sunlight. Villagers are offering rice, lentils, maybe a mango or two, their hands moving with quiet reverence. You find a spot behind a low tamarind branch, trying not to look like you're staking out the scene. The thief, let's call him Kiran, based on a villager's hushed gossip, lurks nearby. He's lean, his dhoti tattered, eyes darting like a hawk's, clutching a small sack that's probably not for groceries. Joke number 1. Kiran's so sneaky, he could probably steal your shadow and sell it back to you. The Buddha's there, standing with a few monks, his ochre robe serene against the grove's green. He's accepting alms, bowing slightly to each giver, his bowl filling with simple offerings. Kiran edges closer, his sack twitching like it's got a mind of its own. You're holding your breath because, yeah, stealing from monks feels like tempting the worst kind of karma. A mainstream historical fact. In the 5th century BCE, Buddhist monks relied on alms for survival, a practice that strengthened community ties and gave laypeople a chance to earn merit, though it also attracted opportunists like Kiran in tough times. This grove's a daily ritual, but today it's about to get spicy. Kiran makes his move, quick as a cat, snatching a bowl from a young monk's hands and bolting toward the trees. The monk stumbles, rice spilling, and a few villagers gasp. You're half expecting a chase scene, but the Buddha just raises a hand, calm as ever, and calls, "Friend, come back."
Kiran freezes mid-stride like he's been hit by a spell, and turns, his face a mix of defiance and confusion. You're impressed. Your last attempt at calling someone back was your dog ignoring you at the park. The Buddha steps forward, his bowl still in hand, and says, "Take what you need, but see what you carry." You're wondering if Kiran's about to get a lecture or a free pass. Kiran, sack dangling, stammers, "I'm hungry, nobody gives to me." His voice is sharp, but there's a crack in it, like he's tired of running. The Buddha sets his own bowl down, rice and all, and sits on the ground, gesturing for Kiran to join him. The thief hesitates, then kneels, still clutching the stolen bowl. The Buddha talks about the 5 precepts, starting with not stealing. Harm binds you, he says. Choose actions that free you. He points to the spilled rice, scattered like tiny pearls. You're thinking of your own small thefts, maybe not bowls, but time, attention, or that one pen you borrowed from work. Joke number 2. Kiran's learning about karma, but you're still guilty about that pen you never returned. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian alms bowls were sometimes etched.
Section 15. You're stepping away from the tamarind grove. Kiran's quiet transformation and the Buddha's words on right action still flickering in your mind like a distant star. The village is hushed now, twilight settling like a soft veil, the air cool with the scent of damp earth and fading jasmine. Your sandals, battered but loyal, scuff along a path toward the village center, and you're pretty sure that goat's retired to a life of petty mischief elsewhere. Tonight's special, the Buddha's giving what villagers whisper is his final teaching here, and you're drawn to a small gathering where lanterns glow like tiny moons. You're ready for a moment that feels like both an ending and a beginning, one last spark to carry forward. The gathering's in a clearing near a modest stupa, its dome glowing faintly under the dusk. Villagers sit on woven mats, their faces softened by the light of clay lanterns, each holding a sesame oil wick that sputters gently. You're handed a lantern, its handle warm, and you light it with a taper, the flame dancing like it's got a secret. A young woman beside you, let's call her Mira, based on her friend's murmur, cradles her own lantern, her eyes wide, like she's holding on to every moment. You settle on the ground, your tunic dusty but forgotten, the lantern's glow warming your hands. Joke number 1, these lanterns are so pretty, they're basically the 5th century BCE version of mood lighting, but with zero Spotify playlist. The Buddha's there, seated on a low platform, his ochre robe blending with the twilight. His face calm yet heavy, like he knows this is goodbye. A mainstream historical fact, the Buddha's final teachings, often linked to his passing around 483 BCE, emphasized mindfulness and compassion, urging followers to be their own lamps in a world of impermanence. This clearing's no grand stage, but it feels sacred, every lantern a silent vow to listen. The Buddha's voice, softer now, weaves through the night. All things pass, your body, your pain, your joys. Be a lamp unto yourself. You glance at Mira, who's brushing away a tear, her lantern steady despite her trembling hands. Mira speaks, her voice small but clear. How do I go on without your guidance? The question hangs, and you feel it too,
After all these lessons, what happens when the teacher's gone? The Buddha's eyes crinkle, almost a smile. The Dharma is your guide, he says. Practice mindfulness, compassion, wisdom. It's all within you. He gestures to the lanterns, their flames swaying. You're thinking of your own path, moments you've faltered, like that time you ghosted a friend or stressed over a deadline. The lantern in your hands feels heavier, like it's asking you to shine, even in your messiest moments. There's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Indian lanterns sometimes had tiny clay beads baked into their rims, believed to hold blessings for the holder. You notice faint beads on your lantern, glinting in the flame's glow, and it's oddly comforting, like a high five from the past. Joke number 2, if these beads bring blessings, you're hoping for one that covers laundry, because your tunic's a disaster. Mira's listening, her lantern raised higher, like she's ready to be her own guide. The Buddha talks of the Eightfold Path one last time. Right view, right effort, right concentration. Urging everyone to live it, not just hear it. You're nodding because yeah, it's a lot, but it's also a map you can follow. Historians still argue whether the Buddha's final teachings were a call to self-reliance or a way to ensure his community's survival without him. Some say he empowered individuals. Others think he was cementing the Sangha's role. Either way, this clearing's a turning point. Mira's face is resolute now, her tears dry, like she's found a spark within. You're feeling it too. Maybe you don't need all the answers, just the courage to keep walking. The lanterns glow brighter.
Now, as the lantern's glow softens, let your breath slow. Each inhale a gentle wave, each exhale a fading ripple. Picture the village slipping into sleep, the stupa's curve kissed by moonlight, the air heavy with jasmine and peace. You're lying on a woven mat, the night cool, stars above like scattered pearls. The Buddha's words, be your lamp, settle in your heart, warm, steady, a light that doesn't flicker. Feel the ground beneath you, solid, holding you as you drift. No need to chase or cling, just rest here, in this moment, the world quiet, your worries dissolving like mist. Let the flute's distant trill carry you, softer, softer, until you're floating, weightless, into a deep, gentle sleep.